Today I want to talk about what I think is the most important part of the healing journey, which is this place where we find ourselves stuck. And I want to talk about how to get unstuck and move forward. So this place where we feel stuck, it's like maybe there's a block in moving forward with financial goals or with our health or in relationship or in your spiritual journey. And maybe we have tension in our bodies or pain. Usually there's tension or pain that sort of goes along with that in our bodies. If we handle that place the right way, there's a way in which we can move through it, transition through it pretty effortlessly, and the solution to the stuckness will unfold organically. But if we don't handle it the right way, which is the way that I've handled it most of my life, we are sort of destined to sort of reiterate the stuckness in our bodies and lives until we sort of figure out the three things that I'm gonna tell you today. So before we get into it, I'm Dr. Jay Eaker from the Bio-Soul Integration Center in Louisville, Colorado. I help people integrate their soul's gifts and their soul's essence into these physical bodies. Our pain, the problems are really our bodies, are really a window to soul. And the solution to realizing our soul's purpose and our soul's essence is to integrate the parts of us that are separate. And that's sort of the goal here at the Bio-Soul Integration Center. And so if you find this video on YouTube, please like it, please share it, please subscribe to my channel. That's very helpful. And wherever you find it, on whatever social media platform, do that stuff there too, because it'll end up there. And I put this on a podcast. You'll find this on audio podcast form. Wherever you listen to your podcast, you'll find the Bio-Soul Integration podcast as well as this episode. Also, I have written a book called If It Didn't Hurt, How to Resolve Your Pain and Discover Your Life Purpose. And again, it's the ultimate guide towards turning the pain, the problem, into a window to soul. And when you come out the other side, you effortlessly find the resources that sort of nudges you towards your life purpose. So let's get started here. So first of all, stuck. It's this place that everyone has experienced. Everyone will experience it multiple times in their lifetimes. It's like, again, you feel like you can't get ahead. There's some block to finances or relationship or health or spiritual growth. And in the Western world, we tend to have this huge aversion to stuckness, and the strategy that we usually take is to try to obliterate the stuckness, take massive action and blast this, destroy the stuckness, which works for some people. But the thing is that every time you encounter stuckness, which you will over and over again, you have to sort of generate all of this oomph to sort of blast through the stuckness. And the thing is that we're stuck because there is a part of us that we have been ignoring. We're fragmented, and there's a part of ourselves that hasn't gotten attention, and the stuckness is because it's asking for attention, and it creates incoherence, it creates friction in our body, mind, in our life, and manifests as stuckness. So every time we blast through the stuckness, we are sort of ignoring this part of ourselves. But if we can become aware of and integrate this part of ourselves that needs attention and sort of integrate the parts, the stuckness, we can move through stuckness much more effortlessly, productively, move through the stuckness. So I'm going to talk about how to do that. And the first key to doing that is to pay attention to the context, not the content. So the idea here is that the universe is constantly evolving and growing. And since we are embedded in the fabric of the universe, we are being asked to grow and evolve too. And when we were in the womb, when we were young kids, we sort of were feeling into the people around us, and what we felt in those folks was the ways in which they'd separated themselves, the ways in which they had judged parts of themselves as bad and tried to push those parts away. And so we assume that that's normal, and we do that too. But it creates all this friction. again, there's parts of ourselves that we're judging as bad and pushing away. It creates all this friction in the system. I would call that our defended sense of self. But life, the universe is kind of nudging us to evolve through that. It's nudging us to come into relationship with these parts that we've pushed away and, come to a new perspective where those parts are integrated. And so every time we sort of transform a layer of that defended stuff, we have to go through these different stages of the process. That happens every time we move through a layer. And there are many, many, many layers. Unraveling these layers is a lifetime journey. Every time we go through one of those layers, there's a process. And that process involves different stages, different themes. And that's the context. But if we don't realize that, we have a tendency to sort of really get attached, really identify with the theme or the stage of the moment. And stuck is one of those themes. And if it's stuck, then we'll have a tendency to think like, lots of frustration usually with feeling stuck. How do I get unstuck? Spend all this energy like trying to strategize and figure out how to get unstuck. And when we're doing that, we're, thinking a lot, how to get unstuck, thinking about it. We're paying attention to the content, not the context. The context is that life is moving us through stuckness. Stuckness is actually a necessary part of the process towards evolving, towards growing. So Donald Epstein, he wrote this book called The 12 Stages of Healing. And this book is kind of the ultimate guide to all these themes that show up every time we move through a layer of our defended self. And like I said, stuckness is just one of those stages, one of those themes. And in my mind, in my experience, it's one of the most, if not the most important one, because a lot hinges on that. It's a big hinge between living in a contracted part of experience and the more expansive parts of life. It's a window to a lot of cool stuff if we can transition through it productively. The second key to moving through stuckness and moving forward is to learn to sort of recognize, especially the themes to recognize stuckness, what that looks like, but also to recognize the themes that are directly before and after. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we get stuck and the theme that's right before that. So again, I mentioned a little bit when we're born, when we're in the womb, our nervous system, the part of our nervous system that's online is the part that's just feeling into our environment. When we're young kids, that part is online. We're just feeling into our environment. And also stuff happens. We have experiences in life that may be hurtful or traumatic in some way. And what happens, we feel how everyone is fragmented and that they sort of what's the word? They sort of thrust their own fragmentedness on us when we're young kids and in the ways that they're behaving. And so anyway, we adopt these patterns in our nervous system where we're judging parts of ourselves as bad and we're pushing parts away. And again, it creates a lot of friction in our bodies and lives because the whole of us is not on the same page. Some parts want to move forward, some parts don't. Some parts are happy, some parts are sad, Some parts want to be in a relationship, some parts don't. Some parts want to make more money, but for some strange reason, some parts don't. So it creates this, friction in our bodies and lives. And it's just a natural part of the process, actually, as the universe is nudging us towards our evolution to become aware of those parts. At first, usually we're not that aware of those parts. And when we're not aware of how we're pushing against some part of ourselves, we'll tend to project it onto the people and situations in the outside world. When actually, those things, the people, the situations, are just elements of life that are trying to get us to come into relationship with these parts of ourselves that we're pushing away. And so it's natural for us to start to become aware of those parts. We start to gain clarity, like, oh, there are parts of me that are happy. There are parts of me that are sad. There's parts of me that want to move forward. There's parts of me that don't want to move forward. There's parts of me that I hate my job, but I love the money. This relationship doesn't feel right, but I'm afraid I'll never get into there's fear, I'll never get into another relationship. So there are these, different parts. And as it's natural for them to become louder and louder, in certain situations we might see the world and live through one part. And in other situations we might live through another part. And it's natural for us to start to clarify, for those parts to become more aware of those different parts and their personality. This is the thing that life is making happen. The universe is nudging us, making that happen. But then we start to become aware of how those parts are opposing each other somehow. Like I said, the relationship doesn't feel right, but we're afraid we'll never get in another relationship, right? So those parts are sort of like opposing each other. And when we become aware of that, we start to feel stuck. We could feel stuck in our bodies. We probably feel stuck in our lives in some way. That's the stage 3. Excuse me, that's the stuck place. Stage 3. In this book, all the stages are numbered. Stuckness is stage 3. The stage that I just talked about is stage 2. Anyway, then we start to feel stuck. And if we're feeling stuck, it's kind of like, here I am again. Here I am in this situation again. I'm thinking the same thing. I'm feeling the same thing. I'm saying the same things. Even though I got out of a relationship, I'm in another relationship and it's very similar. And I'm saying the same thing and thinking the same thing. There can be a lot of frustration that goes with that. I'm stuck. But as we sort of move through the stuckness, as we see this again and again and again, which is common, we eventually come to a place where it's like a place of more surrender, a place of genuine acceptance. Like, oh wow, I'm stuck and I don't know how to get out of this. I've tried all this strategizing and pushing and being resigned, and just tried all these options, all these strategies for getting unstuck, and here I am again, I'm still stuck. There's this, and I don't know how to get unstuck. So there's this surrender that happens, a genuine sort of acceptance about just the fact in the moment that I'm stuck and I don't know how to get out of it. And usually that makes us open to help. That's usually a really important part of this stage of the process, where usually in that place where there's genuine surrender and acceptance, we are open to help. And whether or not we might get to the point where we ask for help, or we might not, but at least we're open to receiving help. And that's super important, because we can't do this healing journey, this life journey on our, in isolation. We need each other to help each other. We definitely need each other to help us get unstuck. Relationship is a big crucible for growth. Lots of times relationship helps you really become aware of stuckness and move through stuckness. But anyway, what then happens, starts to unfold, is what's happening really is we're having more compassion for ourselves. And our stuckness, and our heart starts to open up to our stuckness and the parts of us that have been stuck. It's really, our heart is opening up to these sort of young parts of us that we judged as bad way back in the beginning. And so it involves really this compassion for some young, hurt part of ourselves. And as opposed to sort of pushing against that part of ourselves like we've been apt to do, we start to get on the same page, the same side as that part. And we have more of a capacity to sort of stand up for that part and say, oh, you know, there's nothing wrong with this part, and honor this part. And consequently, we make different choices. We make choices that we couldn't, there are choices available to us that we couldn't see before. We make choices that we couldn't make before because we're now sort of on the same side as a part of ourselves. And it frees up resources. Not being conflicted internally frees up resources, and those resources kind of like become rocket fuel. They become fuel that sort of gets ignited and sort of nudges us forward, actually. And so that's one of the keys of handling stuckness, is that it can, as opposed to having to like work hard and push through stuckness, there's this internal freeing up of resources that nudges us forward, and we actually like surf that wave forward. And so we start to reclaim our power, and that's the stage after the stuckness. We start to reclaim our power. So those are what happens before, what happens, you know, what stuckness looks like, and what happens afterwards. That brings us to the sort of third key to moving through stuckness, which is not to try to get unstuck. It's kind of a paradoxical thing. It's like one of those Chinese finger puzzles, you know, like if you ever had as a kid, where it's like this bamboo braided thing, a tube that you stick your fingers in, and if you try to pull, it tightens. You're like, oh, I'm trying to get out of this thing. If I have to pull harder, it tightens more. If I pull harder, it tightens more. The solution that you eventually figure out is like, I have to push in. I have to go towards, push my fingers together. And it's similar with stuckness. The solution, if we, you know, work really hard to get unstuck, it only makes it worse. The solution is actually to go into the stuckness. The solution is to feel just how friggin' stuck we feel. And so, you know, so feel the frustration that we might feel, the fear that might be involved, the tension that's in our bodies, as opposed to sort of believing the thoughts that we're created by the frustration, or believing the thoughts that are created by the fear, all the thinking that goes on. Actually, what is the sensation of the frustration or the fear or the tension in your body? And so mindfulness practices, mindfulness meditation is a good tool to learn to help us sort of objectively see again the context from the content. All the thoughts that are generated by being stuck, and all of the energy that we're expending trying to get unstuck and strategize, that's the content. But the context, again, the sensation of it in our bodies is part of the context. It's part of how life is sort of squeezing us. It's squeezing us, squeezing the juice out of us. It's cornering us so that we will look at things that we wouldn't look at, feel things that we wouldn't feel before. And that's how we're going to move through the stuckness, how we're going to evolve through the stuckness. And so mindfulness meditation is a tool to help us objectively, again, observe the content from the context. So that's the third thing. Don't make yourself wrong. Don't make yourself wrong for feeling stuck. That's something that seems important. And all of this, like, why would you do this? Why would you go through something this doesn't sound comfortable, right? Well, like I said, if we don't, if we try to push our way through it, it's going to be like that every time. Every layer of stuckness that we have to move through, it's going to be like that. And it creates lots of effort to do that. But going towards the stuckness, like the Chinese finger puzzle, creates space around it, the issue. It frees up resources, and those are resources that can get applied to useful things. And so, applying, sort of going towards, with mindfulness, giving yourself permission to feel the sensation of stuckness in your body, it kind of actually smooths out and actually speeds up your transition through the stuckness. Okay, so just to recap, I feel like the stuckness place is the most important part of the journey. A lot of important stuff hinges on that. It's a window to a lot of cool stuff if we can give ourselves permission to feel the stuckness, feel just how friggin' stuck we feel the frustration, feel the fear. It actually frees up the resources that will help us transition through the stuckness more effortlessly and more smoothly and more quickly. And to remember that you can't erase stuckness from your life. It's not like you go through, lots of times people feel like, oh, I made it through the stuckness, I don't want to ever go back there again. But you're going to come into contact with that part of the process over and over and over again throughout the rest of your life. And so it's a good thing to learn how to do it skillfully. Yeah, it will create more of the sort of like coveted, flow state that everyone's always talking about. Actually, the way to get to the flow is to give yourself permission to feel just how friggin' stuck you feel. It's a paradox. Okay, so if you've found this useful or interesting, please like it, please share it, please pass it along to those who might need this. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check me out on other platforms, on podcasts. You can find the Bio-Soul Integration Podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. Check out my book, If It Didn't Hurt, How to Resolve Your Pain and Discover Your Life Purpose. You can find this book on my website at biosoulintegration.com, and you get $3 off all of the different forms: ebook, audiobook, paperback, as compared to Amazon. And also you have an opportunity there to just read the first chapter, to get the first chapter for free, so you can check it out. Okay, thanks for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and I look forward to helping you express more life. Have a great day.